Hey guys, this is Tommy with Tommy Nation Politics. How's everyone doing today? It's been a rough couple of weeks. The stock market is tanked, a recession looks likely, and the world is facing its first major pandemic. Nevertheless, many philosophers and deep thinkers have observed that every crisis has a silver lining. Crises are part of life. Everybody has to face. It doesn't make any difference what the crisis is. That's what Jack Nicholson said. President Joe Biden proposed a sweeping new $1.8 trillion plan in a speech to a joint session of Congress on Wednesday, pleading with Republican lawmakers to work with him on divisive issues and to meet the stiff competition on China, pushing a vision of more government investment funded by the wealthy. The Democratic president urged Republicans, who have so far resolutely opposed him, to help pass a wide variety of contentious legislation, from taxes to police reform to gun control and immigration reform. He said it's time for corporate America and the wealthiest 1% of America to pay their fair share. Just pay their fair share. Sounds good, but there was something new in there. The idea of positing an American domestic threat without laying it out, without actually attaching specific facts and numbers to it. This is really interesting, and when you do something like that, you should back it up with information, which he didn't. There's a difference between Republicans and Democrats when you were talking about threats. When you were talking about, let's say, illegal immigration, the Republicans will focus on the specific number of illegals that are coming over. Democrats' infrastructure appears to exclude enhancing the nation's southern border, despite the crisis caused by an alarming surge of illegal immigration. As President Biden and Democrats try to ram a $2 trillion spending plan through Congress, the migrant crisis affecting America continues to grow. However, the president does not plan on addressing the infrastructure of the border, and as predicted, he wants to usurp the larger issues like roads, bridges, and subways. 24 hours debating the specifics of President Biden's American Families Plan was happening in Congress today. Last night, during the joint address to Congress, the size and the scope of all the legislation President Biden has put forth in his first 100 days in office speaks to a bigger debate. It's a debate that's played out between Democrats and Republicans for decades, maybe forever. What role should the federal government play in the lives of Americans? The coronavirus pandemic is a humanitarian and economic tragedy. It is causing a devastation, a loss of life, unprecedented economic destruction, and widespread misery. And the presumptive Democratic supermajority has an incredible amount of opportunity to transform the country. In this pandemic, this crisis could become an opportunity, as Joe Biden had put it in his speech, to return to a nation of prosperity. Numerous Democrats have expressed similarly cynical sentiments, with their political instincts telling them not to let this pandemic go to waste. It's worth considering what happened the last time Democrats attempted to take advantage of a good crisis. Whether Biden can truly bring Republicans across a deep partisan divide is far from clear, with Congress polarized and Democrats holding only narrow majorities. He promised in his 2020 campaign to be a bipartisan legislature, work with Republicans, but this $1.9 trillion pandemic stimulus plan passed without any Republican votes, and the Congress has already had their eyes on making gains in the midterms as far as the Republicans go. In 2022, the Republicans are aligning the party around opposing Biden. Many questions have occurred considering his cognitive state, and they're going to go for that opportunity. The White House is hoping that at least some Republicans will bend to popular will. Polls show Most Americans support increased investment in schools, education, and infrastructure, and taxing the rich more. Don't wait until you're in a crisis to come up with a crisis plan. Domination Politics.
In our politics lead today, new details about what feds are actually investigating after they raided Rudy Giuliani's home and office on the Upper East Side of Manhattan this week. The New York Times now reports that that raid was connected to former Ambassador Marie Yovanovitch. You might remember then President Trump removed her as the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine in 2019. And as she testified in the impeachment inquiry, Trump was on Twitter attacking her at that very moment, according to the New York Times. In the midst of a Giuliani and a bunch of shady characters trying to dig up dirt on the Bidens, Giuliani wanted her fired. But at whose direction? Former President Trump? Ukrainian officials? Was Giuliani trying to play both sides? The feds are going to great lengths to answer that key question, as CNN's Jessica Schneider now reports.
New details about the investigation into Rudy Giuliani and what exactly investigators are searching for. The New York Times now reports at least one of the search warrants served Wednesday sought information related to the former ambassador to Ukraine, Marie Yovanovitch. The same Marie Yovanovitch former President Trump fired in April 2019 and who testified as a witness in his first impeachment trial.
Our Ukraine policy has been thrown into disarray. And shady interests the world over have learned how little it takes to remove an American ambassador who does not give them what they want.
Investigators want to determine if Giuliani worked to get Yovanovitch ousted from her position just to help Trump, or also to benefit Ukrainians' interests as he sought dirt from them on the Bidens. It's all part of the long-running criminal investigation into Giuliani and an inquiry into whether he worked as an unregistered foreign agent for Ukraine, while also serving as President Trump's personal attorney. Federal agents served a search warrant on his apartment and office Wednesday, seizing several electronic devices.
Well, about 6 o'clock in the morning, there was a big bang, bang, bang on the door, and outside were seven FBI agents with a warrant for electronics. I've offered to give these to the government and talk it over with the government for 2 years. I don't know why they have to do this. The agents seemed somewhat apologetic, I might say.
Giuliani insists he has never acted as a foreign agent.
I have never represented a Ukrainian national or official before the United States government. I've declined it several times. I've had contracts in countries like Ukraine. In the contract is a clause that says I will not engage in lobbying or foreign representation. I don't do it because I felt it would be too compromising.
What he is asserting is that the issue at hand, and he says the only issue, was an alleged failure to register as a foreign agent. And as you just heard, he's denying that he actually made that failure. Now, we don't know what else is coming. But for a judge to approve this type of search warrant, they believe Giuliani has evidence of a crime. Now, Donald Trump's DOJ tried to hold back this search, according to the New York Times. And today, I mentioned to you how big a story this is. It touches on 2 Justice Departments. It touches on the insurrection. It touches on whether Donald Trump broke laws in 2 plots against the Bidens, basically. The first one, of course, with the Ukraine malfeasance, and the second one, what we all just recently lived through, the effort led by Rudy Giuliani to overturn a lawful election. So the new president understandably asked about this. President Biden telling our colleague, MSNBC's Craig Melvin, he did not know about this federal raid beforehand.
Were you aware of that raid before it happened?
I give him my word I was not. I made a pledge. I would not interfere in any way, order, or try to stop any investigation the Justice Department had underway. I learned about that last night when the rest of the world learned about it.
Hey guys, this is Tommy with Tommy Nation Politics. How's everyone doing today? Tommy Nation Politics.
That's very interesting. And whatever happens in this case, of course, it's a marked contrast to how Donald Trump tried to illicitly control aspects of the government that are supposed to be independent. There you have the president, knows what a big ticket issue this is. We're literally talking about raiding a lawyer who represented the former president. And he says, on his honor, you heard it, he didn't know about it in advance and he wouldn't want to because he respects DOJ independence. We're also learning about a voicemail between Giuliani and Joseph Bondi. He's the lawyer for indicted Giuliani associate Lev Parnas that investigators might be interested in. In this call, you have Giuliani instructing Bondi to call him back at a redacted number, quote, the soon-to-be gotten rid of number. Very interesting. And this is apparently a quite thorough investigation. Politico reports the FBI now interviewed a former Ukrainian lawmaker last year about Giuliani's activities there. And we're learning the warrants include an allegation of what Giuliani mentioned in that audio I played you tonight, that he failed to register as a foreign agent. Now, you may recall we've shown video of Giuliani in Ukraine. A trip that he admitted was taken on Trump's behalf for his Ukraine plot. He said, quote, we're not meddling in an election. We're meddling in an investigation. This isn't foreign policy, and that he was going there to help his client, the President of the United States, Donald Trump, and there was nothing illegal about it. Well, that's his view, and he is a lawyer, and he used to run the Southern District of New York. But right now, the people who do run the Southern District of New York, with its massive federal investigative powers, as I'm reporting to you, they think there may be illegal things here. They convinced a judge there may be evidence of a crime, whether that's committed by Giuliani or someone else, in Giuliani's apartment. As we've told you in our reports before, these legal questions are ultimately not up to the people involved, the defendants or the people tweeting or the people making all kinds of conspiracy theories about other people. The legal questions are resolved in our system, first through the investigative process, and ultimately, if there is a trial, through our legal process. It's up to those processes to decide. Giuliani admitting that during this trip, he was there because Trump asked him to go there, something that Trump even denied.
The President of the United States, I can tell you this, is asking for this.
Didn't direct him to go to Ukraine to do anything or put any heat on
I
him?
didn't direct him, but he is a warrior. Rudy's a warrior.
Quote, I didn't direct him. Spoken like someone who's been in and out of a courtroom and legal processes for a long time. Whatever you think of Donald Trump, he understands from experience how to say the words criminal defense lawyers tell you to say. You didn't direct it. You weren't involved. You relied on others. None of this looks like good news for Rudy Giuliani, although as we've reported, he denies any wrongdoing. He hasn't been charged with anything. Meanwhile, I mentioned the Southern District. A former U.S. attorney there, Assistant U.S. Attorney Dana Perry, says it's a clear indication they're close, very close, to indicting him. Executing the search warrant is almost the last step in the playbook. A quote from someone who knows their way around these probes, and with us is that, Dana Perry, here to give us insights into the legal process. Michael Steele, the former RNC chair who endorsed Joe Biden, and Olivia Nuzzi, Washington correspondent for New York Magazine. You may recall some of her coverage of Rudy Giuliani that was interesting, largely because of the way Giuliani rolls. Her story, A Reporter's Guide to Texting with Rudy Giuliani, was chock full of nuggets that remain, in the news cycle, evergreen. Good to have all of you here. I gave a little legal summary, and we'll get to more of the law. But, Michael, I want to begin with you. Big picture. What does it mean, even in a time where everyone's gotten used to everything, that the former president sees a second top attorney of his indicted by the raided by the Southern District, the previous one indicted, and what does this tell us about the hangover from that Trump era?
Well, it's not a good day in the neighborhood if you're in the Giuliani neighborhood or in the Trump neighborhood, because it means that there are federal investigations that are out there and we don't even know. It's a lot like very good reporters when they put out the first story about something and it like blows up and everybody's like, oh my God, you know there's a second and possibly a third or fourth story coming along. Same is true in this situation with federal indictments. When there's the hint that there's something going on, when there's a raid or an investigation, that doesn't happen, especially when it requires a judge to sign off on it. It doesn't happen unless you have all those dots dotted and those T's crossed in a way that puts some cement to what you're doing. And I think that should be very concerning for Rudy and for Trump. But here's the rub. On the Trump end of it, he's just like, Rudy who? I really don't know the guy. We met on occasions, but I'm not that familiar. What does he do again? So expect that to come at some point if the heat comes up on this, where Trump creates that sort of Heisman move that he's noted for in creating distance between him and the individual who's suspect number 1, 2, or 20. And Rudy then has to figure out how he navigates this space. There are a lot of stories out there about just how sort of thin this relationship is between Rudy and Donald Trump in the first place. So we'll see whether or not that has an effect as this investigation unfolds.
Former President Donald Trump is coming to the defense of his former personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani. On Thursday, federal officials executed a search warrant at the home and office of the former New York City mayor. This is a culmination of a 1.5-year-long investigation into Giuliani's dealings with Ukraine during the Trump administration. Officials question whether Giuliani lobbied on behalf of Ukrainian officials during his tenure as Mr. Trump's personal attorney. He's also suspected of illegally acting as a foreign agent, trying to get Ukraine to announce a criminal investigation into the Bidens.
Rudy Giuliani is a great patriot. He does these things. He just loves this country. And they raid his apartment. It's like so unfair and such a it's like a double standard.
The FBI seized several cell phones and other electronic devices during the search. Thursday's seizures signify another stark contrast between the Trump and Biden administrations. Under the Trump administration, the Department of Justice was blocked from investigating Giuliani's alleged involvement with Ukraine. However, in an interview this morning with CNN, Press Secretary Jen Psaki said the White House was not alerted by the Department of Justice that it would be executing any search warrants involving Rudy Giuliani. She went on to emphasize the importance of the DOJ's ability to operate as its own independent entity. Jessica Levinson joins us now for more on all this. She's a CBS News legal contributor and a professor at Loyola Law School. Jessica, welcome. Great to see you. So, obtaining a search warrant is a lengthy process, especially obtaining one against an attorney, such as, Rudy Giuliani is an attorney, he's a lawyer himself. So why is that, and what steps needed to be taken to execute this search warrant on Giuliani?
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right. I mean, this is a very serious step to take against any attorney. And why? Because you're worried that when you execute a search warrant that you might find attorney-client privileged information. And so the Department of Justice has a process for that. They'll probably have a separate team go through to see and take out any privileged information. And why, Rudy Giuliani, of course, isn't just any attorney. He was the personal attorney for the President of the United States. And that raises different concerns, both, again, with respect to attorney-client privilege, with respect to the appearance of potentially political motivation, with respect to potential executive privilege. And you said, how can you get this search warrant? The standard, in a sense, is the same for everyone. The Department of Justice has to go to a federal judge and say, we have probable cause. That doesn't mean proof beyond a reasonable doubt. It means probable cause to believe that a crime was committed and that we're going to find evidence of that crime in this particular location or in these locations. So it's a high standard for anybody, but then you have those additional considerations, again, because Rudy Giuliani isn't just anybody. He's an attorney and the former president's personal attorney.
Right. And so if nothing is found, does that then raise the specter of this being politically motivated, even though this has been, according to Jen Psaki, the White House press secretary, a completely independent action on the part of the DOJ, not finding something would be embarrassing to investigators as well, wouldn't it?
I think that that's how the public might view it, but I will also say that not finding anything isn't an indication that the federal prosecutors did something improper. It's an indication that they're in an investigation and that they don't yet think that they should have indicted. If you go ahead and indict Rudy Giuliani, for instance, and it comes to light that there was no evidence, that's a stain on the Department of Justice. That then looks politically motivated. But the fact that they're now going through the steps that federal prosecutors are supposed to take an investigation, if nothing comes of it, that just shows that an investigation didn't uncover the wrongdoing, that they had probable cause, but again, not cause beyond a reasonable doubt. All of that is to say that's the kind of legality of it, but how will it look? I mean, I think the way it will play is that the Department of Justice was trying to go after President Trump and there was no there. But that's not what I would view as the reality.
Right. So does the simple fact that this search warrant was executed tell you anything about the amount of evidence federal officials may already have against Giuliani?
Well, it tells us that they have enough evidence to go into court to say to a federal judge, we think there's probable cause here. It doesn't tell us that they have more evidence than that, but it shows that they've at least reached that fairly serious threshold. You know, where are they in the probe or in the case? We don't know for certain, but we know that they've at least amassed enough information, enough evidence to give them an indication that it is, in fact, proper to go into federal court and to say to a judge, we would like to have this search warrant. And when it comes to a search warrant executed on Rudy Giuliani, what we should also think about is this had to go up to the highest levels of the Department of Justice, either probably the Deputy Attorney General or, depending on the timing, the acting Deputy Attorney General. So this worked its way all the way up through the Department of Justice. And that does give us some indication, I think, of the severity and where they are in the investigation.
And so what happens next into this probe into Giuliani? And if you were his attorney, would you advise him to remain silent? Because we know he does like to speak out, and not always to his benefit.
Yes, client control could be, understatement alert, client control could be an issue when it comes to Rudy Giuliani. I would absolutely say that he should remain silent, that he's not going to help his case by speaking out. And, you know, what happens next? Well, investigators will go over the evidence. As I said, I think as separate members of the Department of Justice will pull out anything that could be subject to the attorney-client privilege. And then investigators will go over the evidence and I absolutely think that they'll do what any investigator should do, which is follow the evidence. If the evidence leads somewhere, then they could either ask for additional evidence or we could go forward with an indictment. If the evidence indicates that there's no wrongdoing, then you close an investigation. And so I don't mean to give you every lawyer's answer of it depends, but it really depends what they find. And so, yes, my advice to Rudy Giuliani would be make yourself scarce and try and be very circumspect about what you say in public, because it's very unlikely to help this case.
And if this investigation does reveal any new information about the Trump administration's involvement with Ukraine, could it implicate the former president in any way? Could he possibly face any new charges as a private citizen?
Sure. I mean, if it uncovers evidence that the former president of the United States violated a federal statute or tried to further Rudy Giuliani, for instance, tried to aid and abet his violation of a federal statute, again, depending on the evidence, depending on what's uncovered, yes, a former president absolutely could face a federal indictment. Again, in the world of hypotheticals, we don't know what would be uncovered. We don't know if we're just looking at potential violations of lobbying laws with respect to the Ukraine and or also wrongdoing with respect to the 2020 election and allegations of pressure tactics when it comes to that election. But the former president at this point does not have any immunity as a result of being the former president. That's the key word there. So he doesn't enjoy any protections that you and I don't enjoy.
Right. All right. Well, Jessica Levinson, thank you so much for your legal insight. We appreciate it, as always.
Thank you.
And Danya, you look at the situation, as Michael mentions, just for reporting the news, if any former lawyer to the recent president has their home and office raided, it's a huge story. If this happened to former President Obama and his top lawyer, particularly overlapping with a time when he was the lawyer to the sitting president, we would be reporting that. It's a big deal. It hasn't happened, though, recently to other presidents. It's happened now twice to Donald Trump. Based on your knowledge of SDNY, and we quoted you earlier, where do you see a raid like this figuring into an open probe?
Well, as you say, it's highly unusual. Raids on lawyers' offices are unusual in the first instance. I've seen it done a couple times, both on the defense side. I represented Michael Cohen, who I know will be on later, and Michael Avenatti, both of whom had their offices raided. And there's a lot of steps in the process. I was on the other side for many years at the U.S. Attorney's Office. I had to sign off on these kinds of warrants. And, you know, the U.S. Attorney has to sign off, the Assistant Attorney General or Deputy. And these ones almost assuredly went up to the level of the Attorney General. So it's a very big deal. Typically, the standard is probable cause. In this case, there was no doubt a much higher standard that was in fact applied. I don't know if it rises to beyond a reasonable doubt, but these lawyers at the U.S. Attorney's Office have been waiting a long time. They've run through all the paces. They have this locked down.
There's common sense, and then there's lack of it. That's part of life. That's essential to growth. However, when you take and forget what you learned, then, well, that's just being an imbecile. And that's not going to help humanity at all. By now, we all realize you deserve autonomy and the restoration of universal freedoms. However, it's not going to come from spreading their message. The distortion has become the threat to true humanitarian freedom. Everyone has a story. Everyone has a conflict, but we are screaming at the wrong people. Social media is a platform to connect. So why are we disconnected from each other even more? We got the ability to grow more food in a safe way. We also have the ability to clean all of the water sources so that our future generations can have that clean water. So why in the hell are there rules to actually go against the environment and endanger our food supply? Now, let's talk about race. Yes, let's talk about race. So let's be practical with this. If disease doesn't discriminate, if poverty doesn't discriminate, then why are we discriminating against each other? Let's think for once. People of all ethnicities have been subject to some form of abuse. And when you start to compare the crimes against humanity, instead of recognizing the crime as a whole global effect, they already won. Racism has done way more damage than all the wars in the world. Looking to where the people have facts. Now, why in the hell are we bickering when most of us are in the very same damn situation? Do you think there are going to be people who say that? Look again. This is how they keep the cycle going. They choose stories that drive more division than unity. For example, they classify low-income communities as at risk for mostly shit we don't care about, like gender equality, safe spaces. Question is, when in the fuck did we become like puppets just being led? We know what we need: better housing, more effective jobs, stronger infrastructure, a safe environment, and pathways to sufficiency for people with disabilities. How hard is it to provide these things? And to be honest, the last thing on anyone's mind is choosing another puppet to argue over. With that said, please be more aware of the mistakes, the hidden messages, and the lingo of overall legislation. Now, a heads up, people who like smoke cannabis and is happy that cannabis has been legalized could still be in the crosshairs of losing the one protection that their tax dollars paid for. I'll leave you to figure that one out. Let's also bring up the fact that the moratoriums on evictions and foreclosures will be ending soon, leaving millions vulnerable to homelessness, losing what they have had for years. Now, talks about a fourth recurrent stimulus sounds like a dream come true for the ones who are struggling long before this pandemic. But they might get left behind once again. What do you think? Until next time, this is Slave Nation. Live hard and live free, while you still can.
Thank you.